As I said last week, Job lost all of his children and all of his properties on one day. Then soon after that, he was stricken with disease, mainly the skin disease. So it was natural that while when he opened his mouth, he started to complain about his life. But as his arguments with his friends continue, his complaints is more about his friends, what his friends are doing, and how he was hurt by their sayings. This shows that we humans are really emotional beings, that our emotional hurts are very important. We have desire to live with peace in mind and dignity of our lives. So Job, although he suffered physically a lot, he also suffers emotionally because of his friends. And today's reading is one of these responses to the emotional suffering. It was again in the response to Bildad's speech, just like last week, but it was not to the same speech because Bildad spoke 3 times in the book. And he starts the same speech by saying, "How long will you harass me and crush me with your words?" And first part of his speech was mainly about the relational difficulties, how relationship has deteriorated since he was stricken with this disaster. And comes today's reading in the second part of the second and the later part of the speech. He says, "My bones cling to my skin and flesh. I have escaped by the skin of my teeth." Well, it can refer to his skin disease because his disease was mainly skin disease. He had sores all over the body. But it is more likely, I think this is the expression of his agony. As he's being condemned, he feels like his bones cling to his skin and flesh. As his friends really look down upon him and just charges him with all the things that he has done. Thus he says, pity me, you're my friends. God's hand has truly struck me. So it's because God has struck me, you are supposed to have pity on me, not to insult me. That's what friends are for. Friends are for difficult times. When you have difficulties, friends are supposed to comfort, console, not to accuse that person. So that's why he says, pity me to his friends. And he says, why do you pursue me like God? God does. Well, God is a God judge. So he has the right to say, you are doing the wrong things. But his friends, they are friends. So why do you put yourself in the position of judge and say, you have sinned, when he needs comfort, consolation? And he says, all is hungry for my flesh. Like, for example, the predator just trying to get something, their need. So what he's saying is, while his friends are pretending to help him, actually their desire is really to predate him and just eat him up, really to hurt him. And we see that really happens in many friends or so-called friends. They either because of envy or because of simple hatred or anything, they really want to hurt their friends. And then he says, oh, then my words were written down, and even say forever engraved on stone. So he really desires his words to be written down because he feels that he's not being heard at this time, but maybe in the future, there will be somebody who will read this and say, Job was right. The interesting about this is that it was actually written down, and we can read Job's words now. So he is so disappointed that he's being accused at this time, that he just desires that maybe in the future, even after I die, somebody will vindicate me. Somebody will see that I was right. And it is with this hope, he says, but I know that my Redeemer is alive. This probably is the most known sentence of the whole book of Job, partly because of Handel. Handel's Messiah has a very beautiful song on this line. He says, my Redeemer is alive. The word redeem in English means to buy something, get something with money to really make it restore something or so. And redeemer, in the context of ancient Middle East, is one who seeks to restore someone's situation. If somebody gets into the debt and has to sell their property, then the redeemer, which is the closest relative, comes and buys the property for the person so that the property won't be lost to a foreigner completely. That's the work of the redeemer. But Job is not talking about that person, but he's talking about God, as our psalm actually describes God as redeemer. Although the word redeemer did not appear in our psalm today, it talks of God as redeemer because it talks about the redeemed of the Lord. So God is our redeemer from the situation of misery. He's restoring our situation by paying something. That's the concept that Job has here. God as redeemer, and my redeemer is alive. I know my redeemer is alive. And in this case, he's hoping that God will redeem him by vindicating him and restoring his name, restoring his honor, while his friends are accusing him of being a great sinner. Job knows that he's not. So my Redeemer will just vindicate me sometime. Is his hope. And that's indeed what he's saying. Afterwards, he will rise upon the dust. So he'll rise means that he will act. Although my God is silent and is acting against me, it seems, but one day he will rise and act for me. Then further he says, from my flesh I will see God. And here we can see that although in last week's reading, he was wishing to die, that was not his deepest desire. He was so miserable that he was even wishing to die, but that's just a complaint. His deepest desire is really to live and see God. And here we see that he really was seeing ahead of other people of his time, because before Jesus' time, they didn't really talk about resurrection that much. But by saying, from my flesh I will see God, it seems that he was firmly believing that the resurrection will happen after he dies. Not only that, he says, I will see God. Because in that time, they couldn't really think about seeing God. God is invisible. Of course, we still believe that God is invisible. But we still talk about seeing God because we also feel that we also know that God is God that is close to us. So there is a way of seeing God, although God is invisible God. So when he says, from my flesh I will see God, he's really expressing the faith that is really the truth. that people of that time couldn't really think of. And it says, my eyes see and not a stranger's. Many translations actually translate this as a future tense, but see be translated as the present, and I think that's correct translation. What he's saying is that I know this for sure. It's not as if that other people told me and I'm just quoting it, but this is my faith. My eyes see it. So while he has been complaining about God all the time, he still holds on to the true faith of God, that he is alive and he will vindicate him in the future. And this faith, sheer faith, is his sheer hope as well. Then he turns to his friends again. You say, how will we pursue him? So he's saying, the idea is just about pursuing him. Your idea is really to hurt. You don't have right attitude. But then he says, you ought to fear the sword yourself. You think that you are just free of these miseries that I'm suffering because you think you are righteous and I'm guilty. But don't think that way. Actually, it's you who are doing wrong things. You should be fearful of the judgment of God. And thus it concludes his speech. And this speech really gives us some lessons. In times of storms, if you want to say, just like the disciples were in the storm, and in our gospel reading. And it happens a lot in our lives. There are many times that we feel that we are fighting against a great storm. We should really look to our Redeemer, because God is our Redeemer. God is our vindicator. God is the one who pays to restore our situations. And that means we are looking to the final judgment, because God is going to do that in the final judgment. He will surely vindicate us, even if not in this life, at the final judgment. And in the final judgment, there will be judgment for the offenders, as Job pointed out to his friends. Those who like to hurt others rather than help, like Job's friends, will be judged. Whether they do it through their words or they do it with their fists or something physically, they will be judged. Because God really wants humans to respect each other. And there should be both warning and comfort to us. Warning, if we are in the side of offenders, we have to just look into ourselves and say, have we really offended others? Because of my wrong desires, because of envies, because of hatred, and so on. Because of the desire to have upper hands over others. And it should be comfort to us if we are in the side of the offender. When we feel, why are people so mean to me? Why are people so bad to each other? Let it be a comfort that there will be a final judgment, and those offenders will be judged. But perhaps more important side is that the final judgment, there will be vindication to the wrongfully hurt. When others seem to hurt us without reason, we can be assured that God knows all about this, and God will vindicate us. God will just comfort us about our hearts at the judgment day. And especially like Job's case, when people seem to have wrong opinions of us. And when I say wrong opinions, I include both misunderstanding, like Job's case, but also judging us with wrong standards. People simply hate somebody because of the race. There are racists around. People simply hate because they just judge on the basis of one's ability. Because simply I'm poor, they hate me. They look down upon me. Or because I don't look good, they look down upon me. All these things. We suffer, but God will vindicate us at the end. God will say, no, there's nothing wrong with not being intelligent, having lots of money, or so and so. God knows. God's only judging on the basis of your character, basis of your relationship with God. And indeed, we see this in our New Testament reading as well. Paul was being accused of very inferior apostles. He was an inferior apostle because he was suffering a lot. But he's saying that in all these things, my hope is in God. For example, it says, as unknown and well known, meaning that he was unknown to people because he really misunderstands him. But God knows. Or as going through pain, but all is happy. He is going through pain for being misunderstood. But he was happy because he knew that God was honest. So let us take heart when people hate us, people look down upon us, people misunderstand us for no good reasons, because God is our Redeemer and God will be on our side. Glory be to the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.